Welcome everybody. It is now time to start. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We are very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. Webinar IBT Partners series of webinars about growing your exports and your international business. Now today we're very excited to be talking about global compliance and CE marking. It is a great agenda that we've got for you, and we hope that it will be a great program to bring you lots of useful information and takeaways. That is our objective. Our objective is at the end of this webinar, not only will you have enjoyed listening to Susanna and Tony, experts in this subject matter and on the subjects we're going to be discussing and presenting later, they will be giving you lots of takeaways. But before we dive into this, I want to spend a moment on housekeeping. So do know that this is one of a series of webinars. If you go to IBT Partners /resources/webinars, you will see the whole program that is laid out for you. There are some interesting webinars planned for later this month, May and June. This webinar will be approximately 30 minutes long. The brief introduction by myself, then I will hand over to Susanna, who will introduce the program, the table of contents, and of course today's speaker, our guest speaker, we're very excited to have with us, Tony Woodford from TÜV. Do know that this is an interactive webinar. We want your participation. So there will be polls. There are going to be 4 of them. I will be jumping and rudely interrupting both Susanna and Tony at various times, saying, please, let's do this poll. We would ask you to participate. So please give us, share us your opinion. There will also be time for questions at the end. So on your screen, if you look at your screen, there's a little box there at the bottom right-hand side. It says questions. Please use it. Open it up. Send us your questions. We will collate those questions and respond to them. There is a chat box as well, so please don't hesitate. Use the chat box. Let us know what your thoughts are. And at the very end of this webinar, there will be a questionnaire, a brief survey, so we'd love to have your opinion back. So, and finally, do know that, of course, we are recording this, and you will get a copy of this recording and the slide deck on Friday. This will be automatically sent to you. So without any more ado, what I would like to do now is to take a moment to present both Susanna and Tony. I can just tell you that both of them have a lot of experience in the subjects that we're going to be diving into today. Susanna, in terms of European, a true European, Susanna is half German, was born in Germany, was educated in Brussels and has lived and worked in Brussels, Paris and London. Susanna has over 20 years of experience helping companies internationally. I think when she starts presenting, you'll understand what I mean. Let me turn my attention to Tony. Tony has spent his entire career working with standards and compliance. I've never discussed with somebody who knows more, though he says that actually it's very simplified, but he has a wealth of knowledge that he's going to be sharing with us later this afternoon during this webinar. He moved to TÜV in the UK in 2015, and he's a noted expert on CE marking and has a global outlook on compliance, which is very interesting because, as you're going to discover, we're going to be talking about CE marking, but also global compliance. So I think that this is going to be a great webinar, lots of expertise there. And now we're going to move to the next slide to talk a moment or two about IBT Partners. IBT Partners, we are a private company. What we do is online business development. Through our offices in the UK, Germany, France, and the United States. We've been in business for 15 years, and our core activity is helping companies grow their exports and business internationally. And the way that we do that through delivering what we call localized websites. So shall we say that's a German website for the German market, a French website for the French market, and then we do all of the ongoing localized search engine optimization and social media, country by country. So in a nutshell, that's IBT, and we'll be diving into more of that later. I'd like now to take a second to talk about TÜV, a world leader in the provision of technical services worldwide. TÜV is the company that is the go-to company with regards to everything that we're going to be talking about today in terms of compliance. What I'm looking forward to specifically, it has to be said, is that underlying mission of the focus of the interaction between man, technology and the environment. Now when Tony gets presenting, he's going to deliver a wealth of knowledge, and behind him sits a huge organization, TÜV, founded in Cologne in Germany in 1872, a $2 billion company. Really, we're delighted to have them as guest speakers today to help us navigate this particular subject. So with that, I'm handing over to Susanna, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. That was a great introduction, and I'm just going to present here the sort of table of contents, what we're going to be looking and talking about today. As John pointed out, we're going to, I'm going to give a brief introduction, just talk to you about sort of some digital compliance, and then hand over to Tony, who's going to talk about both CE marking and global certification, and then obviously answer some questions. So just to get started then, I wanted to share with you a little bit sort of some intro into our world and how we see the world at this moment. Just very briefly, there's a lot of talk at the moment about trade, about perhaps the end of globalization. Now, both TÜV and IBT Partners, we do websites, they do compliance, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of the fact that we both deal with exporters. By definition, both TÜV and IBT Partners deals with exporters. So we are really focused on international trade, and when we see international trade going down, we're like, really? So I was very interested in this report put out by McKinsey Corporation earlier this year in February and March, talking about the global digital ecosystem and the huge growth in digital flows. Obviously the largest band or pipe is between the United States and Europe, and this also mirrors, I think, the compliance world that we'll be talking about afterwards. So I want to share that slide with you and just say, okay, perhaps global trade is stalling, and we have a lot of sort of worrying signs from political side, certainly. But if you look under the cover a little bit, look under the hood, I think you'll find that in fact it's not stalling. This is cross-border bandwidth and so on is evidence of continued global appetite for trade. By the way, as John said, you will be getting a recording. These slides are very packed full of information. Don't bother taking notes. We'll send them to you. Just sit there, enjoy the webinar, and ask questions. Put some questions in. The other thing I wanted to show everybody was sort of, what is a localized website? A lot of people are not sure about that. If you have a website in your core domestic country, then and you're an exporter, then you might benefit. We think that you will definitely benefit from a localized export website. Let's take the example here is one of our clients who's I want a website that really functions in the UK or really functions in France, that's fully integrated. And what does that really mean? It means having a localized website that's built for its target markets, right from the ground up, from the architecture, from the metadata, everything, right, and then straight through to the marketing and the brand building in the local market. And it's built on a couple of major foundations. I guess the main premise is that markets are different, and we all have to recognize our uniqueness, but at the same time, we all have similarities. I won't spend too much time on this one. I'll go through,
Susanna, can I be rude and jump in there and present a poll?
Please do.
Okay, well, please, that's very interesting. Now, are you all ready? I'm going to launch a poll. Here we go. Now, this poll should sit with this subject, and it says, do you already have localized websites for your key export markets? So when you're looking internationally and when you're discussing about internationalization, what about your major export markets worldwide? What about only a few of those markets, or are you thinking about it, or is the answer no? Now let me share some information. The feedback I'm getting is 8% are saying yes to all major markets, 0 for a few, 40% are thinking about it, and here we have about 40% are saying no. That is very interesting. Thank you for that live information. I'm going to close this poll and hand back to Susanna.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I just wanted to leave you with sort of an enunciation about this slide here. Localized websites, just like local compliance, is based on the fact that markets differ. And in the online world, Google's differ per market. And in fact, if you're looking at China, you shouldn't even look at Google. You should look at Baidu. And that means that Google in the United States is not the same as Google in any other market. Even in the UK, Google is different. And if the search engines are different in each market, and search engines localize their algorithms, then it goes absolutely logical that the search engine optimization is also country-specific. So you might be well optimized for your one market, but that does not imply at all that you have any optimization in the international markets. And then just the third sort of truism I would leave you with here is just to say that social media today also has to be part of any exporter's plan and is part of and is also has to be well localized into the international markets. Now, talking about online compliance, we have a webinar actually dedicated fully to this topic in the 1st of June. But I would say that the whole area of compliance, the online world and internet, is quite slow really to get involved in compliance. We don't have an equivalent of a CE mark or whatever until really very recently at all. And even then, it's just in February of this year, the EU and the USA decided to introduce new compliancy levels called Privacy Shield. But I think it's going to be extremely topical and important in the next few years to get this part right and to get the compliance of this right. And before turning over to Tony, I would just say is I think that TÜV emphasized very much, compliance, yes, it's the law and the regulation, so there is no choice about it. But compliance and real good compliance, quality compliance, means growing your brand through growing trust. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Tony, if you're there.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just wanted to check with you that the slides are changing because I'm having trouble viewing slides and not coming up as quickly as they should be, I don't think. But I'll go through and carry on. And so basically I'm here this afternoon just to have a quick chat about CE marking and how you can go about putting together a technical file that will satisfy the European Union, basically. So initially we've got what is a CE mark, and at the end of the day the CE mark is a self-declaration by yourself, the manufacturer or the importer of the product. It's not a mark to say the product is going to work, it's not a mark to say the product is of quality, it's just a declaration to say that you've considered the local markets and the local legislations and directives, and you feel your product is safe to place into the European Union.
Tony, before we jump on, we do another poll, please?
Yes, absolutely. I was just about to jump on that and say thank you so much. This is the absolutely time for the next poll. And here we go. I'm going to launch that, and I hope that your screen, that you will get this poll. Now, here we go. I launch. Now, here you go. Please, everybody, tell us about it. Do you currently sell products direct or via distributors in the EU? Give us some feedback. Sell directly, sell via distributors, mix of both, sell via other means and routes, neither. Now, let me give you live feedback. The majority are telling us they're selling directly. They're selling directly by 30%, and then 28% is a mix of both, and 22% say neither. And then 11% are saying sell via distributors. So I thank you very much indeed. We will keep this information, and as Susanna said, we will get this information to you. So you'll have all the feedback by Friday. Thank you. I'm closing that webinar, and back to you, Tony.
Okay, no problem. So as you can see on the next slide here, you've got various directives that apply to different electrical products primarily. There are a few machinery and toy-related items as well that you can also apply CE Mark II. EMC covers the electrical magnetic interference, either interfering with other products or interfering with other people. So you have EMF, which is the electrical magnetic fields such as coming off telephones or high frequency motors like washing machines, etc., where you may have something that interferes with people. There are several steps on how to go to putting a CE mark onto your product, and we've broken them down into fairly simple titles. So part one is to identify the relevant directive to your product. So you go to the European Union website, where you can then pick up directives which are all free of charge. You don't have to pay for directives. So if anyone ever tries to charge you for one, you can say, no thank you, I'll go and get it myself. Once you've chosen your directive that's most relevant to your product, you then need to decide for yourself which is the best way of showing you conform to that directive. So you have self-declaration, where you read the directive and decide my product is fairly inert and it doesn't need any third-party testing or third-party assistance. You have product testing, where you may have an electrical product or a medical device which needs testing. You then have the quality systems from a notified body. That's where somebody like us or Intertech or whoever you may be using as your notified body can step in, and they will carry out testing for you. They also do factory audits, production control. This is mandatory on medical machinery and some construction products, and then is voluntary on other items where you can have voluntary test marks like a GS mark or a TÜV mark. You may see on some items things like the old BSI kite mark. These are all voluntary marks which then show that your product has been through third-party assessment. Or you can have any combination of the above.
Tony, can I jump in there, because I've got another poll. This one looks like a really good technical poll. So if I may, following on for what you just said, this follows on very nicely. I'm launching yet another poll. This will get you all. This is a technical question. Are you ready? Launching. Do you hold and maintain a technical file and a declaration of conformity? So that is a DOC for your export product. So please give us your feedback. What are you saying? I'm getting 100% no at this particular point in time. It's yes signed by us, yes signed by an external service provider, only a DOC or only a technical file. So what have we got? I'll give you results. 15% are saying yes signed by us, 14% saying signed by an external service provider, and a large majority, 53%, are saying no. Well, there you go, Tony. That's food for thought for you and for us all, really. I'm closing this poll and I'm handing it back to Tony.
Okay, thank you for that. So next steps for CE marking your product, you go through to step 3, which then involves looking at standards. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of standards. They're all available through looking at the official journal. There's a link there to it on the slide. Standards range from anything from, you may have seen some in your industries. There's 60335, which covers all household appliances. You have 60950 that covers IT. Medical devices come under the 60601s. And all of these standards then have part 2s for individual products. So you have a part 2 for a kettle, a part 2 for a muscle stimulator. Everything has its own individual standard. So to identify these, you would go to look at your product on the official journal. Once you've worked out what standards your product falls under, you can then either decide whether you manufacture and self-test, or you can send it to a test lab like ourselves, or let's say many others dotted around the world, and have the product tested by a third party. If you're having it done by a third party, it means you've then got some sort of backup and verification in the future if there's a problem with your product, if it goes through to maybe having some sort of recall, or if it ends up where it's failing in the field. At least then you can go back to the test lab and ask them to bring up the test reports and see exactly what was done and how it was done. So once you've decided on your standards and you've had your product tested, you then need to create these technical files that was mentioned earlier on. Now, a technical file is a living document which contains everything about your item. It needs a general product description, it will need all the test reports, bill of material, exploded diagrams. You'll need to put in there information about REACH, ROSH and WE, so that's your chemicals and your restricted hazards and things like how you recycle the product at the end of life. And then most importantly, you have your declaration of conformity, which is your piece of paper to say the product is safe to place on the European market. As I say, technical files are living, breathing documents. So if you make a change to your product, if you add a new component or you change the color, if you do anything to your product, you should be putting in extra files into your technical file just to show when you changed it, where you got the component from, and how you've gone about making sure the product is still safe. So going on to the final few steps, you then have step 5, which is preparing of your declaration of conformity. Now, as I said before, this is your key piece of paper to say your product is safe. Now, the DOC needs to be signed by somebody who's prepared to go to court and even go to prison if it all goes wrong and the product ends up killing somebody in the future. So that it's very important that whoever signs this piece of paper is fully aware of what they're signing and why they're signing it. And basically it's a document which you can, if you actually type DOC or Declaration of Conformity into Google, you can get several different versions coming up on there. Best place to usually see one, if you wanted to see one of the products you may have in the home, is almost all lawnmowers or power tools have them in the back of their instruction manuals, because they have to have them under Machinery Directive in the manual. So following on from your CE marking basics, what might happen if it goes wrong? Now on this slide here you see there's a few pictures of products which we've come across in test labs over many years. I mean, I've been working in test labs for nearly 15 years now, and I've seen quite a few products like this come through our way. And they can be through the toaster in the middle, for instance, was when the ROHS, the ROSH directive came into force, people started removing restricted hazards from their products, such as fire retardants. So they removed the fire retardants from their products, and automatically the product then can catch fire. So products had to be redesigned and rethought afterwards. We get to see a lot of fake products like the iPhone chargers there. We get them all the time coming through from local trading standards offices. Even down to fake fuses, like the plugs you see on the top left and the top right. You get fake fuses in products that don't actually stop the product from exploding. And I've seen on some occasions, I've got some videos actually I can send through if you want to see, of what happens when a fuse doesn't work and a plug explodes out of a socket. If your product does end up doing this sort of damage in a home, it's quite likely it'll end up having to go through what's called the VAPEX, which is the Rapid Alert Product Recall System for Europe. VAPEX reports are usually carried out through local authorities like trading standards in the UK, and what will happen is they will enforce upon you that you have to have the product removed off the market. So on this particular one here you can see this is an egg incubator, and what's happened here is the cable has not been protected correctly whilst doing a pull test. So what happens is you pull and the cable can pull straight out of the product. If the plug is still plugged in, you're left with bare wires that can then cause electric shock and death. So obviously this product was removed off the market immediately across the whole of Europe. This particular product was tested and product was found in UK, but then it also fed through into Poland, France and also into Germany. So the the rapid alert, there's a link on there. If you click on that in the future, you can then set yourself up with weekly or monthly updates where it gives you a list of all the products that are on the alert list. And if there's anything you're worried about that you may have seen or may have, you can actually search the alert list and go through to find out if you've got a product in your home that should be removed or sent back. So following through from there, we're moving on to how TÜV can help you in the future to try and stop products ending up on the basically on the rapid alert list. So the route to creating a technical file can follow, as we said before, a self-declaration route. It can follow a basic lab assistance route, or it can follow a full certification route. So if we pick, for example, a TV or a camera or some kind of IT equipment, because they're fairly inert products that everyone has in their home, isn't a high risk. If you're manufacturing one of these, you've got the option of self-declaring. So you can create your own technical file, you can create your own declaration of conformity, you can write your own risk assessments which then go into your technical file to show why you've looked at the standards but decided that you don't need to go any further than have it tested because you think the product passes all the requirements. Of course, if it does go wrong at this stage and you haven't had any third-party assistance or third-party certification marks in your product, that's when you're most likely to run into trouble with large fines, possible imprisonment, and very little help from outside sources if you end up in court. TÜV can offer, as can most test labs, a system of we take it in 3 levels really. You've got the basic level of documentation reviews. So basically that's where you have a test report that's been given to you by the manufacturer or from your importer. The test reports should normally come in anything between 30 to 300 pages. If they give you a single page, which is the front page, and they say this is all you need, then it's wrong. You need the full test report to go in your technical file, because in some cases there are parts of the standards which the manufacturer has asked the test house to not test or ignore, and you don't know that if you haven't got the full report. What we can do is we can take that test report and then just confirm it is done properly, it's done to the right standards, it's got the right dates, because standards are changing all the time. We can even go down as far as checking that the test lab that's carried out this test are actually accredited. All test labs should be accredited locally by, in the UK it's UCAS, in China it's hot class, in the US you have OSHA, so you have different bodies that check the test labs are doing what they should be doing correctly. On some occasions we'll pick up a test report and say it's actually fake, and in that case we can then carry out a basic safety assessment on the product, making sure that the product has the correct markings, the correct instructions, the correct labelings, just the basic things to put the product on the market. We'll also look at things like the plug, does it have the right pins, is the fuse real, if you pull on the cords, does the cord come out, is there access to live parts through small gaps. We won't do a full test, we'll just look at it in a very basic general view. And then if they still feel there's a problem with the product, they can then take it apart and do full testing from start to finish. Not sure if you've ever read a standard before, but they're extremely boring documents which go on for pages and pages, that we've got engineers here that live by them, and it needs somebody with a keen eye and a passion for that sort of thing to actually sit and go through a product like that page by page. Like mentioned earlier on, there are certain products which you have to do this, such as medical devices, machinery items, some construction products. These are all sort of high risk items where people could get harmed, or in the case of medical devices, where obviously if a medical device fails, somebody could end up obviously not just getting very poorly, but also if in a hospital, possibly even dying. So it's very important that all medical devices are tested and certified, and following on from that you then have factory audits, pre-shipment inspections, and ongoing surveillance, where we pick up a product during the year and make sure it's still the same one that was tested. So following on from CE marking, other countries around the world have their own schemes. Most of them are actually quite more stringent than the CE mark. Some of them are actually very strict. On this next few slides, I'll cover just a few of them, the most popular ones being the CB scheme. Now, the CB scheme is a passport system which is operated by the IEC, and it covers roughly 50 to 60 countries. This jumps up and down all the time, it changes around, but it's between 50 to 60 countries. And the way the CB scheme works is you have your product tested to the local deviance for the particular standard. So you go to the IEC version rather than your local UL or BS or EN. You pick the IEC, the international one, and you say to the test lab, I want to sell my product in Turkey, Slovenia, France, UK. You give the list of all the countries that you're interested in, and that test lab will then look at all the local differences, all the local country differences, to make sure that they're testing it for different power supplies, different plugs, different voltages. Many people forget that the UK has a 3-pin plug and a different fuse to most other countries. So the CB scheme is a full test and a full certificate, and that then gives you a passport to those countries. You then take your test report to the country and say, we've had it tested, can you please give me a front page report for your particular country, and the local office will then do that for you. Following on from CB, we then have the US and Canada marks. UL is the most popular route into the US markets, and CSA covers the Canadian market. As a OSHA-backed test lab, TÜV and Intertek and any other test lab you go to are also NRTLs, and they also have the capability of issuing a US or Canadian test mark. So what we'd do then is we'd take the product and test it to the UL version of the standard rather than the international or the BSEN. System works very similar. The product is tested by us, we issue a test report. Major difference with the accessing into the USA is for NRTL certificates, you have to have your product inspected and your factory inspected 4 times a year. You've then got Japan, which is very similar again to NRTL in terms of you have to be a notified body for that particular scheme, which we are. With Japan, you have similar testing as with CBs. The products are actually tested to the CB test reports the same, and they have 2 different categories of products over there. They have products in category A and category B. Category A is their specified products that need certification by notified bodies. So they're usually items that are of the higher risk categories, high power products, chargers, anything that's got heating in the elements in it. And what you need to do with category A products, that's the ones that have got the little diamond shaped logo, you have to have them tested, and then you have to have the product factory audited and certification and follow-up, etc. It's very similar to NRTL. They also have category B products, which are the more inert products like the telephones, TVs, kettles, toasters and things like that. Those are the ones that are very similar to the CE mark in Europe. So you can self-declare on that product, but you still have to have it tested to the CB version of the standard. The Japanese market is a very expanding market. It's an easy one to sell into with the products, but you just need to be very careful of whether you're a category A or category B. And the best way to work that out is going onto the METI website, which is on the link there, and that's got 2 different great big long lists on there showing you what to do and how to do it, and how to do a self-declaration as well. And then the final global test mark that we're going to just briefly mention is a new one for this year, but it's one that people have forgotten about until the last few months, and that's the Gulf mark. Gulf mark is mandatory of July this year. Basically, it covers all of your Gulf region countries, so Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait. Now, all these countries currently have their own product certification system, which you need to have for getting your products into those countries. SASO, for instance, for Saudi is one that we run here. But on top of that, from July, you then have to have your products tested by CB accredited lab, and you then have to have that CB test report accredited by a notified body under the GSO, which is the Gulf certification body. If you go to the website gso.org, it gives you a list of all the products that are covered under this. Mainly it's domestic appliances and toys, except vacuum cleaners. For some reason they forgot to take this into account when they were looking at the SIC codes, when they were checking what they could basically add to it. If you need any more help on SASO or the Gulf region, please do email me afterwards, because I say it's a very new topic and there aren't many labs in the world that can actually help you with this. I think there's only 2 at the moment, us being one, that are a notified body for electrical appliances on this scheme. Going forward from there, there's many other markets obviously in the world. You've got the Russian market that uses custom union, you have Australia with the CTIC, you have METI in the South Americas. We can help you, we can assist you, and we can do any of these marks as well. If you've got any questions, please ask.
Tony, thank you so much. I have to say that's a brilliant map, your in the information you've been providing, I can tell you the questions are queuing up. We'll get to question time soon. Please continue to submit your questions. If we don't manage to answer them during this webinar, Tony, his contact details will be available. We'll certainly get back on this later. Meanwhile, I'm going to have our last poll. So Tony, here we go, and everybody, here we go. This is absolutely relevant to this screen and this global market access. Here you go. Please, what is your view, and are you up to date with global compliance in all your export markets? Tell us, are you really, do you rely on an external expert? Do you do this in-house with diligence? Are you not sure? Or is the answer no? Let me give you some feedback. 38% of people are saying, yes, we rely on external experts. 7% are saying we're doing it in-house. 35% are not sure. There you go. Well, please don't hesitate. Tony and TUV would be certainly able to help you there. And 17% say no. And again, we'll get back to you on that. This information will be provided to you on Friday. I'm closing this poll and I am handing this back to Tony. Thank you.
Okay. As I say, we've covered CE marking, we've covered global king. If you've got questions that you need to come to me with, please, as I say, you've got my email address, you've got my phone number on there. Give me a quick message. If I can't help you locally, we have local offices in the USA, we have local offices in Europe. Most countries we can have a local language if you've got somebody you need to speak to about something that's giving you some problems.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, Tony. That was a great sort of bird's eye view on compliance, not just CE marking, but global compliance. And it's intriguing to me how CE marking, I always hear a lot of grumbling about CE marking. It looks actually a lot simpler than many others. And
it is far simpler, to be honest, Susanna. It is one of the easiest marks to go through. It's just you need to make sure you get that right standard in the first place.
Yeah, and that's really come across in a very interesting way. And then getting sort of third-party help, like service providers, like TÜV, like TUV, to step in, because it also, from our perspective, it's clear to us, working on certainly on the digital side, that compliance is going to be one of the key themes for exporters over the coming years. And just to reiterate from our side, from web building and website management side, it is a picture that is changing as we speak virtually. It is a tough thing to keep ahead and to really understand fully on. We do have, as I mentioned earlier, a dedicated website on this on the 1st of June with a German and a British legal experts on data privacy joining us, which will be, I think, really, really great for digital compliance in Europe. Now, John, you said you had some questions. Do we have any time for questions, please?
I think we should absolutely. I'm going to take the top 5. I thank you very much indeed. And indeed, there we have a page with all of the contact details, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. But I'm going to quickly jump to a first question. This one, Tony, please. Here's a great question. I like this one. This is, guess what, China. Can I use a declaration of conformity, a DSC, that has been signed and given to me by the manufacturer in China? What's the view there, Tony?
Yeah, I get this quite often where people are importing products and selling them on places like Amazon and eBay, where they're just bringing products in from China and think they've got a bargain and they can make a lot of money on it. Now, the problem is, with a product that's got a declaration of conformity from a manufacturer, if that manufacturer is in China, or if the manufacturer is in Brazil, or wherever they may be in the world, you can't do that. If you're placing the products into the EU market yourself for the first time, now whether it's an unbranded item or even if you're putting your own name on it, you then become the legal entity of that product, which means you need to create the declaration of conformity and you need to also hold the technical file for that product. So then if anything goes wrong, they can come back to you.
Wow, that's a wake up. Thank you very much indeed for that clarity. Then to flip over to this one has come up, Susanna. Websites online in Europe. How many? What does that mean? How many sites in Europe?
Well, that's actually a great question. I mean, what is Europe? From our point of view, ideally you should have one market per export market. So Europe, the EU is 28 countries, so 28 websites. But for most companies, that just sounds like way too much, and I think you need to prioritize and really say which are the important markets for me. Remember that the 3 big contesters, Brexit excluded, the UK, France, and Germany, that's more than 50% of EU GDP, more than 50% of EU consumers. That could help you work out some priorities. And the other point to remember here is that, for example, one German site actually has a larger sphere of influence than just the 80 million German consumers. It'll also touch into, obviously, Austria, obviously German-speaking Switzerland, but also into the Netherlands, into Denmark, into the Czech Republic, into Poland, and that's sort of quite a big sphere of influence. So in fact, it is larger than just pure Germany. So we would say, first of all, prioritize. If you're not sure of your priorities, remember that the top 3 countries are really key for Europe. Thanks, John.
No, thank you. I do remember once upon a time actually going to Apple's Europe page and being surprised they have 35 websites in Europe. That amazed me. Tony, jumping back to you, please. This one, my product has been tested for Germany and Spain. So I take it that's okay for sale in the UK?
Depends on the product, to be honest. If the product has a plug on it, then probably not. As mentioned before, when you test for CB against the international standards, people often forget that the UK has a higher voltage and a 3-pin plug. So things like, we had actually in the lab the other day, we had a panel that had been tested for a 2-pin plug in one of the Benelux countries, and unfortunately they hadn't took into account the 240 plus 10% for the UK and the fact that you have a 3-pin plug, so the product had to be brought into the lab and completely retested again for those extra parts. So yes, in terms of it can be right, but if your product has a plug on it and it's going to a different country where you have a different plug, same if it's going to the US. If you're taking a product into the USA market, obviously you've got the voltage and the current round the other way, so you've got to take that into consideration with a lot of the products as well.
As they always say, devil is in the detail, and thank goodness for TÜV. I mean, that one takeaway is clearly how TÜV can help these companies be successful internationally through such program as you've outlined today. Susanna, I will take two more questions. I'm going to jump one into Susanna and then the final one for Tony. Susanna, what are the best social media platforms internationally for Europe?
Good question. We manage websites and over time and the social media of those websites. Now, the big three, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, those are obviously, key for all markets, but each market uses them differently, and not all countries use them for business as much, or some countries use them for more than business. I mean, Facebook is used frequently for business in Europe, more frequently than in the United States. Also, each market, certainly each large market, has its own preferred local standards as well. I mean, give you an example. LinkedIn is, the big mastodon, but in France you have Viadio, in Germany you have Xing, which are competing local ones. So very frequently, if we're looking for, say a client of ours is looking for a distributor in Germany and wants to use his website to find distributors, we'll put things on Xing rather than LinkedIn to find distributors.
Thank you so much for that. And the final question, Tony, and I think this is going to make a number of people happy because we've been asked this at least 3 times online. Thank you so much for the questions. What is the relationship between CE marking and what some people call ROHS or ROHS and REACH? Tony, can you help a couple of people out there, please?
Yes, certainly. I mean, first of all, we'll stick with the REACH first. REACH is a European directive looking at the amounts of nasty chemicals being used and where they're being used. REACH is nothing to do with CE marking as such, but you do have to put a REACH declaration into your business. It sits alongside the WE directive as well, the waste equipment and electrical one, where you have to then put in how your products can be recycled at the end of its life cycle. So those two are completely separate directives. ROHS does sit in with CE marking. ROHS 2, which came out fairly recently, is a restriction of hazardous substances in your manufacturing. So you have to cut down on things like leads, cadmium, phthalates, all the nasty chemicals that can cause damage to people over a longer time. So yes, ROHS is part of CE marking. REACH and, as I say, WE are both separate legislations which aren't part of CE marking but do need to be thought of quite seriously.
Tony, thank you so much. That's very, very helpful. And please do know out there that your questions are noted. These questions, both to Susanna and Tony, will be delivered to them later this day, and you will be hearing from us to answer those questions if we haven't been able to answer them now. I want to thank you all as we close out this webinar today. We want to thank you and hope that you enjoyed this webinar and found lots of useful information, lots of takeaways. A little closing factoid, as I was looking up, and CE marking. CE marking actually came in 1985, so there's a 31-year history there. And clearly a very important actor in that whole program has been and is TÜV. So thank you very much indeed, Tony, for helping us understand CE and, of course, on more of a global scale. Do be aware that this webinar was one of a series of webinars and we have webinars coming up in the future, as Susanna said. We do have top tips for EU digital compliance. We do also have one on how to sell online in the USA. You can go to IBT Partners / webinars, and you will find those webinars listed there. Do stay online now, because as we close out this webinar, there is a survey, so please, we'd love to have some feedback from you. When I shut this down, on your screen you will see the survey, and we would welcome your feedback to help us do better in the future. So on behalf of Susanna and Tony, I want to thank you very much indeed for joining us, and it's my occasion here to say, Susanna, thank you so much. Tony, thank you so much. I think that you've both done an excellent job today, and a great webinar. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you to all the exporters. Keep going, keep exporting.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, and have a great day.